Kate Gill, Co-CEO of Professional Footballers Australia. Nice to have you on the program again. What is the position of the PFA with regard to the announcement that hasn't been made public yet, but everybody assumes will be shortly, and that is that Visit Saudi has become a sponsor of the FIFA Women's World Cup?
Yeah, look, the immediate reaction was one of shock, I would say. You know, when you think about the demographic of players and referees and coaches and people that this is being promoted to, you know, that being obviously women and the strong LGBTIQ plus representation we have through that group, it's hard to see how they've kind of coalesced into finding that Visit Saudi is the right sponsorship for a Women's World Cup tournament. I think when you look at it on the surface, you can see it's a kind of blatant disregard of their human rights. When you look at the country itself, you know, LGBTQ plus people are still regarded as criminals, and women over there still really face strict restrictions of their rights. Obviously, that's notwithstanding the progressions that have been made as well. It just kind of sat really uncomfortably when it was first announced.
And I guess this is part of the difficulty, isn't it? And the difficulty for an organisation like yours, because you represent players, and internationally, FIFPro represents players from everywhere, including the women who play the game in Saudi Arabia. So how do you juggle what is happening there and representation of them and their voice with very different cultures of players that you represent here?
Yeah, it's a really challenging position to be in, and you want to be respectful of where people are at. And I think when you look at I'd say the majority of the cohort of players, you can really see how actually socially conscious they are. Some of them are really avid human rights defenders, and you've seen that in them being really outspoken. But I think when you kind of boil it down, they are all women, and the rights of women in Saudi Arabia are really restricted. You know, there's no public life for them really. So I think it's more about advocating to make progress and to shed a light on what's happening over there, and to also try and respect where everybody's at as well.
And for those in Saudi who say they do have a public life and life has been changing for them, they're a lot more involved in communities, in running businesses, in lecturing at university, in having a women's football league. What do you say to them?
Yeah, look, you want to be respectful of that, and you want to acknowledge the progress. I think it's hard to kind of find the balance and the tension between FIFA being involved in this decision, and, you know, FIFA speaks to upholding universal human rights and protecting those human rights. And when decisions are made where they aren't as progressed or advanced in countries, I think it's really hard to kind of look at FIFA as an honest broker and someone who is committed to the statutory commitments that they've made as well.
And so would all of this be resolved somewhat if FIFA included the voice of the athletes in these sorts of decisions, when they look at decisions about signing up major sponsors for the women's game or for the Women's World Cup?
Yeah, completely. I mean, those decisions then the athletes become the face of those decisions, and it's really challenging when you don't have full transparency over why these decisions are made, what has actually gone into the thought process behind this, not even giving the players a voice in that, and then having it thrust upon them, and they then become the spotlight for the decision, and they're the ones that obviously have to educate themselves on why this has happened and then become the public voice for that. It's putting a lot of pressure on the players. So I think it would be very welcomed if they would actually sit down and have those discussions with the players so they can fully understand and ask questions as to why this needs to happen.
And let's talk about that pressure on the players, because I know at the press conference this week where the squad was announced for the Cup of Nations tournament, and the players pretty much said that first and foremost, they are players and they've got to have their head in the game. And I guess we can refer back to the Socceroos video that was put out ahead of Qatar in addressing workers' rights, and again, the rights of the LGBT community ahead of time. And that also put a kind of exclamation mark on it, saying, this is what we have to say. Now we're going to focus on the game. Is there a danger with these sorts of discussions and the discussions that will no doubt continue in the media and in the general public, that the players are implicated unfairly notwithstanding that they have their own opinions and want to have a voice in this, but that essentially they want to concentrate on potentially winning the FIFA Women's World Cup and how they navigate that space with all of us?
Yeah, it's another way of looking at it. And I think people hold attention that players can't do two things at once. Yes, they do have to focus on what they're there to perform, but they're also human beings as well. And they do have opinions and views that actually matter and need to be expressed and need to be heard. Some will be more comfortable being forthright with that. I mean, you've seen what the Matildas did in relation to Indigenous rights when they held up the Indigenous flag. You've seen how outspoken Megan Rapinoe has been on matters that matter socially to her. So I think we need to give the players some credit. I think that they will educate themselves, they will inform themselves, and they do have the right to speak freely. I don't think they should be sanctioned in that way and not given the opportunity to speak.
And is there only one voice, though? And I guess this is, one of the critical factors, again, coming back to an organisation like yours, a player association. What happens when there's differing voices within that? What happens when there are players who maybe have a strong religious faith or come from a different part of the world where culturally their experience is so different to what they might have had in a country like this?
Yeah, look, you've always got to balance that and understand what the end goal is here. And I think one of the kind of areas that this resonates with me is in relation to LGBTI plus rights and pride and advocating for that. People may not understand it and may not have the education behind it. It may not align with their beliefs, but I think you can either be obstructionist in that view. You can either, just kind of get on board and go along with it, or you can just stay neutral in that discussion as well. So I think we need to wrap our heads around where everybody's at and just respect that decision as well.
You brought up before the players and their involvement in, holding up an Indigenous flag. And I guess some people would also point to the fact that Australia has some issues with regards to human rights. Even most recently, a delegation had to suspend their tour because they were not being given access when they were looking at, torture in the prison system, etc. And so how much do you think those sorts of issues and what's happening on the ground here in Australia are also going to play into using the FIFA World Cup to get some sort of a legacy in those departments?
Yeah, I think it's critical. I think we should turn the torch back on us and we should be having those social conversations. And I think we've got a government now who's open to that, and you can see them actively engaging in those conversations. So I don't think we can shy away from those discussions. I think we should welcome them on and usher them in and be able to confront our past and deal with those issues.
And so as the player association, the player body, are you being included in those discussions either with the government or with the organising committee here or with Football Australia in these regards where these sorts of decisions will be made?
We would love to. I don't think we do get included in those conversations. I don't think we are really seen as a proper stakeholder in the game. And that's a level of frustration for us because we do have the trust and the buy-in of the players, and the players' voice is valuable. So I think those governing bodies are really doing themselves a disservice when they're not engaging with the players directly.
And so your message to them, if they're listening?
Is to talk to the players. They're human beings. As I said, they can do two things at once. They do have an opinion, they are educated, and it will only help the decisions that are being made. And if the players have full transparency and actually understand that and can see why the decision has been made, then I think that puts everybody in a better place.
Does any sport do it well, Kate?
It's a good question. It's hard when you're sitting on the Players Association side of things because obviously you see your perspective. I'd like to think that they do. I haven't come across any that have really fully engaged the players in those discussions. We have it every now and then, and that mostly happens around the collective bargaining narrative. But in terms of the broader game decisions, I don't think anyone does it particularly well.
Hey, Gill, good to talk to you. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Tracy. Really appreciate it.